Welcome to my channel, The World of Science Fiction. Don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel.
The wind over the rocky plains of Varus carried only silence, broken occasionally by the sound of boot heels striking against scorched stone. Kai Nern pulled his collar higher against the biting chill, his breath forming small clouds that dissipated quickly in the thin air. The training outpost loomed ahead, a collection of stark, utilitarian structures that seemed to have grown organically from the barren landscape itself. Varus had been beautiful once, or so the history texts claimed. Before the war with the Cyan, it had boasted forests and oceans. Now it was little more than a memorial to battles long forgotten, its surface scarred by weapons that had stripped away all but the most resilient forms of life. The Federation maintained the outpost not because Varus held strategic importance, but because forgetting seemed somehow worse than remembering. Kai adjusted his pack and quickened his pace. He was already late for the induction ceremony, not a good look for his first day at a new posting. The other recruits had been processed hours ago, their footprints still visible in the thin layer of rust-colored dust that covered everything on this world. "Move it, Nern!" The bark came from Sergeant Voss, a stocky woman whose scowl seemed permanently etched into her weathered face. "The others finished the ceremony ages ago. What's your excuse?" "Transport delay, Sergeant," Kai replied, knowing it wouldn't matter. Excuses never did, even legitimate ones. "Well, you're still going through it. Tradition is tradition, even for stragglers." She jerked her head toward the central plaza. "Get moving." The plaza was empty save for a single figure at its center. Not human, but a statue carved from the local stone. It depicted a Cyan woman, seated, her arms held open in what could be interpreted as either welcome or surrender. Her skin, rendered in pale rock, captured the distinctive ridges along the cheekbones that had marked the blue-skinned species. Her eyes were closed, her expression serene yet somehow sorrowful. Time and weather had taken their toll. A jagged crack ran down one side of her face, and her fingers had been worn smooth by countless touches. "You know the drill," Voss said, crossing her arms. "Kiss the forehead of the last Cyan. Seal your commitment to the peace." Kai knew it was more than that. The statue represented the Federation's victory, a conquered enemy immortalized in stone. The kiss wasn't about peace, it was about dominance. The thought left a bitter taste in his mouth. "Today, Nern." Kai approached the statue, studying its features. Something about the figure struck him as odd. The way the stone seemed almost translucent in the fading daylight, the unnatural stillness it projected. Not just the stillness of stone, but something deeper, more absolute. He leaned forward, hesitating just a breath away from the cool surface. Then reluctantly, he pressed his lips against the statue's forehead. The stone was cold against his lips, as expected. But there was something else, a faint vibration, like a heartbeat transmitted through rock. Kai pulled back, frowning. "Did you feel that?" he asked, turning toward Voss. The sergeant opened her mouth to reply, but her words were lost in a sudden rumble that shook the ground beneath their feet. A network of cracks spread across the statue's surface, starting from the spot where Kai's lips had touched and racing outward like lightning. The statue's eyes opened. They were not stone but flesh, a luminescent blue that cast eerie shadows across the plaza. The cracks widened, pieces of stone falling away to reveal smooth blue skin underneath. The statue, no, the woman inhaled sharply, her chest expanding with her first breath in what must have been centuries. Kai stumbled backward, his heel catching on a loose stone. He fell, eyes fixed on the impossible sight before him. Voss was shouting into her comm, but the device emitted only static. All around them, lights flickered and died as power systems failed throughout the outpost. The Cyan woman rose from her seated position, fragments of her stone prison falling away with each movement. She was tall, taller than any human, her limbs graceful despite the evident stiffness in her joints. Her body was covered in a fine layer of ash, and strands of white-blue hair fell over her glowing eyes. Those eyes found Kai, fixing him with a gaze that seemed to peer into his very soul. "You kissed me," she said. Her voice was melodious, with an accent that made the words sound almost like music, despite the gravity they carried. It wasn't accusatory or curious, merely a statement of fact, delivered with the weight of absolute certainty. "I didn't. I mean, it's just a tradition," Kai stammered, scrambling to his feet. "We didn't know you were..." Now they will return, she continued as if he hadn't spoken. She lifted her hand, studying her own fingers with a detached fascination. The seal is broken. The signal is sent. Voss had abandoned her useless calm and drawn her sidearm. Don't move, she ordered, training the weapon on the CN woman. On your knees now. The woman turned her gaze to Voss, expression unchanged. Your weapons cannot undo what has been done. The signal has already crossed the void. As if to confirm her words, a high-pitched whine cut through the air. Kai looked up to see lights blinking in the darkening sky. Satellites that had been dormant for as long as the outpost had existed, suddenly awakening. The ground beneath them trembled again, more violently this time. In the distance, structures long buried in the planet's surface began to emerge, breaking through layers of dust and stone. Transmission arrays, their surfaces etched with glyphing script that Kai recognized from historical archives as Sieni. The woman closed her eyes briefly, as if listening to a distant sound. When she opened them again, there was something like sorrow in their glow. They have heard, she said. They are coming. 6 hours later, Kai found himself in a cramped security office that had been hastily converted into a command center. Emergency lighting cast harsh shadows across the faces of the officers gathered around a holographic display showing the space surrounding Varese. They just appeared, Lieutenant Commander Rail was saying, gesturing to the cluster of ships that had materialized at the edge of the system. No jump signatures, no warp trails. 1 minute our sensors showed nothing. The next, this. The ships were unlike anything in the Federation fleet. They were massive, their hulls adorned with the same glyphing script that marked the transmission arrays. Their design defied conventional spacefaring logic. Asymmetrical, with protruding structures that seemed more ceremonial than functional. Yet they moved with precision, forming a blockade in high orbit around Varese. See any warships, Admiral Thorne said, his voice tight. I've seen the historical records. These are siege vessels, designed for planetary bombardment and occupation. But the Cian are gone, Voss protested. They retreated beyond the fringe after the war. There hasn't been a confirmed sighting in over a century. Apparently they weren't as gone as we thought. Thorne's gaze shifted to Kai, who stood uncomfortably in the corner. Tell me again exactly what happened. Kai had already recounted the events in the plaza multiple times, but he did so again, trying to recall every detail. When he finished, the room fell silent. And the woman? Thorne asked. Disappeared, Voss answered. During the power failure, security systems were down for 13 minutes. By the time they came back online, she was gone. We've got search teams combing the outpost and surrounding areas, but Varese is honeycombed with caves and ruins, Rail finished for her. She could be anywhere. A communications officer burst into the room, face pale. Admiral, we're receiving a transmission from the Sieni fleet. Thorne nodded grimly. Put it through. The holographic display flickered, the image of the fleet replaced by a face. The Cyan who appeared was older than the woman from the statue, with deep ridges across blue skin and eyes that glowed with a harder light. Federation outpost, the Cyan said, the words precisely enunciated. The treaty has been broken. The keeper has been released. We return to settle the debt. This is Admiral Thorne of the Federation. We have no knowledge of any treaty. The release of your keeper was accidental. We are prepared to discuss. Discussion ended when the seal was broken, the Cian interrupted. Prepare your defenses or surrender. Those are your options. The transmission cut off abruptly. The holographic display reverted to showing the fleet, which had begun to move, spreading out to surround the planet. Get me Federation command, Thorne ordered. Priority Alpha. And I want everything we have on the Sian War and any treaties that ended it. An intelligence officer stepped forward. Sir, that's the problem. Most of the treaty details were classified. Level 10 security clearance. The public records only mention a peaceful resolution, with no specifics. Then get me someone with level 10 clearance, Thorne snapped. That's just it, sir, the officer continued. The records appear to have been redacted, possibly erased, even at command level. The implications hung in the air like a physical presence. Someone had wanted the details of the treaty forgotten, buried so deeply that not even the highest levels of government could access them. So we're facing an enemy that's responding to a treaty violation we know nothing about, Rail summarized grimly. I need to find her, Kai said suddenly. All eyes turned to him. The woman from the statue, he clarified. She called herself the Keeper. She knows what's happening. She might know how to stop it. You're not authorized for field operations, recruit, Voss began, but Thorne raised a hand to silence her. He's right, the Admiral said. She's our only link to whatever's happening. But we need a formal search operation, not a solo. An alarm blared, cutting him off. The holographic display shifted again, showing multiple entry points in the atmosphere. They're landing, Rail reported, voice tense. Drop ships, at least 30 of them, dispersing across the planet. Thorne's expression hardened. Battle stations, all personnel to defensive positions. Get the civilians to the shelters. As the room erupted into activity, Kai slipped out the door. No one noticed his departure amid the chaos, exactly as he'd intended. He had a feeling that formal search operations wouldn't find the Keeper. But he might. After all, she'd looked at him when she awoke. Not at Voss, not at the outpost, but at him. There was a connection there, whether he understood it or not. And right now, that connection might be Varessa's only hope. Kai moved through the outpost with practiced stealth, avoiding the personnel rushing to their stations. His years of border patrol before joining the main Federation forces had taught him the value of going unnoticed. He made his way to the equipment locker, gathering what he needed. A survival pack, rations, a handheld scanner, and a pulse rifle. He hesitated before taking the weapon, then decided that facing whatever was coming unarmed would be foolish. The night air bit at his skin as he slipped out through a maintenance exit. The outpost was on high alert, but all attention was focused upward, toward the incoming CNE ships. No one was watching for a single recruit heading into the wasteland. Varus's landscape was treacherous even in daylight. In darkness, it was a maze of hidden crevasses and unstable ground. Kai activated his scanner, setting it to detect life signs. It was a long shot. The device was calibrated for human biology, but it was all he had. For hours, he tracked through the rocky terrain, following faint energy signatures that might have been the Keeper or might simply have been remnants of the ancient war that had scarred this world. Twice he had to take cover as CNE dropships passed overhead, their engines emitting a distinctive harmonic whine, unlike Federation vessels. Dawn found him at the edge of what had once been a CNE settlement, now little more than foundations half buried in dust. The rising sun cast long shadows across the ruins, creating illusions of movement that kept Kai constantly on edge. His scanner beeped, a life sign, stronger than the ambient readings. Not human, but not registering as local fauna either. It was coming from the center of the ruins. Kai moved cautiously, rifle ready. The ruins seemed to shift around him, perspectives changing with each step, as if the very geometry of the place defied human perception. It was disorienting, and more than once he found himself turning in circles, unsure of his direction. "You won't find your way using that," a voice said from behind him. Kai spun, rifle raised, to find the Keeper standing atop a broken wall. She had shed the last remnants of her stone prison, and now wore what appeared to be garments fashioned from the environment itself. Fibers woven from the tough grasses that somehow survived in Varessa's harsh climate. The paths here were designed to confuse those who don't understand CNE architecture, she continued, stepping down with fluid grace. The scanner only makes it worse. Kai lowered his weapon slightly, but kept it ready. "I need answers." "You've brought a question with metal teeth," she observed, eyeing the rifle. "Is that how your people typically seek knowledge?" Embarrassed despite himself, Kai slung the rifle over his shoulder. "The CNE fleet is in orbit. They're landing troops. They say we've broken a treaty our own records don't even mention. I need to know what's happening." The Keeper's luminescent eyes studied him with unnerving intensity. "Why did you come alone? Why not bring soldiers? Would you have spoken to me if I had?" A faint smile touched her lips. "No, that's why." She gestured for him to follow, leading him deeper into the ruins. They came to a structure that had remained largely intact, a dome-shaped building half buried in the hillside. Inside, the air was cooler, and strange patterns etched into the walls emitted a soft, pulsing light. "My name is Sealana," she said, settling cross-legged on the floor. "Though your people never recorded it, to them I was simply the last CN, a convenient symbol." "The statue," Kai said. "You were inside it." "How?" "Not inside. I was the statue." She traced a pattern on the floor with one long finger. The containment system used my own biological material as its base, converting living tissue to stone while maintaining consciousness. A living death, you might call it. Kai felt sick at the implications. You were conscious? The whole time? In a manner of speaking, time passes differently in that state. I was aware, but not as you understand awareness. I perceived centuries as moments, punctuated by the touch of those who came to mock what they thought was merely a monument. Her gaze flickered to him. Until your kiss broke the seal. I didn't know, Kai said, the words feeling hopelessly inadequate. Of course you didn't. That was the point. The knowledge was erased, the truth buried. Ceylana stood in a single fluid motion. But the Cyan remember. We always remember. Remember what? What treaty? Why were you imprisoned like that? Not imprisoned, sacrificed. She moved to one of the walls, placing her palm against a particular pattern. The etching glowed brighter in response. The war between our peoples was destroying both sides. Your weapons were cruder, but more numerous. Ours were elegant, but required resources that were growing scarce. Neither side could win. Neither would surrender. The wall before her seemed to liquefy, the solid material flowing aside to reveal a hidden compartment. From it, she withdrew a crystalline object shaped like a teardrop. So a bargain was struck, she continued. The CN would withdraw beyond your territories. A single representative, me, would remain, bound into a form that would serve as both hostage and monitor. Through me, my people would know if the Federation honored its part of the treaty, which was to leave certain worlds untouched, worlds that held significance to my people, sacred sites, ancient homes. Her expression darkened. Worlds your Federation claimed were uninhabited, but knew were not. And my kiss was the signal that the treaty was void, that your people had decided to resume hostilities. She held up the crystal, which began to glow with an inner light. My awakening transmitted a message across the void to my people. They believe your Federation intentionally broke the seal. But it wasn't intentional, Kai protested. It was just a tradition, a ceremony. We didn't know what it meant. Ignorance born of deliberate forgetting is still a choice, Ceylana replied, though her tone held more sorrow than accusation. Your leaders buried the truth so deeply that even they forgot what was hidden. Now they reap the consequences. The crystal in her hand pulsed, projecting images into the air between them. Sieni ships deploying not just to Varus, but to dozens of worlds throughout Federation space. Not bombarding population centers, but securing specific locations. Ancient ruins, seemingly empty territories, sites that had once held significance to the CN. They will reclaim what was promised to remain untouched, Ceylana said, and they will not stop until they have it all. Or until we stop them, Kai said. The Federation won't surrender its territories without a fight. Then there will be war again, a war neither side can truly win. She closed her hand around the crystal, extinguishing its light. Unless a new signal is sent, a new silence established. What kind of signal? The same kind that was broken. Ceylana's eyes met his, unwavering. A living seal. Understanding dawned slowly, bringing with it a cold dread. You mean someone has to take your place? Become a statue like you were? Yes. It should be you then, Kai said, the words coming automatically. You were the original seal. You could explain to your people what happened, that it was a mistake. Ceylana shook her head. I've been broken. The CN would never trust a seal that had failed once before. She stepped closer to him, close enough that he could see the intricate patterns in her luminescent irises. It must be someone new, someone who represents the Federation's genuine desire for peace. The implication hung between them, unspoken but unmistakable. No, Kai said, backing away. No, I can't. I won't. Then war will consume both our peoples again, Ceylana replied simply. And this time, there may not be enough left of either to forge another peace. Strange lights flickered across the horizon as Kai and Ceylana made their way through Varus's rock valleys. Night had fallen again, the darkness broken by the occasional flash of weapons fire in the distance. The Sieni landing parties had encountered Federation resistance, and skirmishes were breaking out across the planet. We don't have much time, Ceylana said, her voice low. My people are methodical. They will secure key positions first, then begin a coordinated assault on your major installations. And killing me won't stop them? Kai asked, only half joking. She glanced at him, expression serious. If that would prevent war, I would have done it already. Comforting. I don't offer comfort, Kai Nern. Only truth. They had been traveling for hours, heading toward what Ceylana called the Echo Basin, a natural amphitheater where, she claimed, the original treaty had been signed. Kai's feet were blistered, his muscles aching, but he pressed on. The alternative was returning to the outpost and watching helplessly as the conflict escalated. They were crossing a narrow ridge when the first tremor hit, not the gentle vibrations they'd felt before, but a violent shudder that sent cracks racing across the ground beneath their feet. Run! Ceylana shouted, grabbing Kai's arm and pulling him forward. They sprinted along the ridge as the stone began to crumble behind them. A deafening roar filled the air, the sound of the planet itself tearing apart. The tremor intensified, knocking Kai off his feet. He tumbled dangerously close to the edge, scrabbling for purchase on the disintegrating rock. Ceylana turned back, reaching for him despite the danger. Take my hand! The ground between them split open, a fissure appearing with frightening speed. Superheated gas erupted from the newly formed vent, obscuring Kai's vision. Through the haze, he could see Ceylana hesitate, then leap across the widening gap. She landed hard, her foot slipping on the unstable surface. For a heart-stopping moment, she teetered on the edge of the precipice, arms windmilling for balance. Then she steadied herself and lunged forward, grabbing Kai's wrist in a grip that was surprisingly strong. Move! She ordered, hauling him upright. Together they raced along what remained of the ridge, the destruction pursuing them like a living thing. The path ahead narrowed to a knife's edge, barely wide enough for one person. There's no time, Ceylana said. Jump! Below them was a drop of at least 30 meters, ending in a jumble of sharp rocks. Are you insane? Kai gasped. In answer, Ceylana wrapped her arms around him and leapt, pulling him with her into empty space. Kai's scream was torn from his throat by the rush of air. They plummeted toward the rocks. Then suddenly their descent slowed, as if they were falling through liquid rather than air. They landed with jarring force, but far more gently than should have been possible. Kai rolled onto his back, gasping for breath, staring up at the ridge they'd just abandoned as it collapsed entirely. How? Sieni physiology, Ceylana replied, rising to her feet with a slight grimace. We can manipulate local gravitational fields for short periods. Not enough to fly, but enough to cushion. Kai noticed she was favoring her right leg. A blue-black liquid, blood he realized, was seeping through a tear in her improvised garments. You're hurt. It's nothing, she said dismissively. We need to keep moving. Not until I look at that wound. She started to protest, then relented with a sigh. Quickly then. Kai examined the injury, a deep gash running along her calf. The edges of the wound had an odd crystalline appearance, as if her blood was partially solidifying on contact with air. Does it always do that? He asked, gesturing to the strange effect. Yes, it's why we don't bleed to death easily, but it won't heal properly without treatment. She tore a strip from her garment and handed it to him. Bind it, tightly. As Kai wrapped the makeshift bandage around her leg, a sound from above made them both freeze. The distinctive whine of a Federation dropship echoed through the ravine. It passed overhead, flying low, its searchlights sweeping the terrain. They're looking for us, Kai murmured. Not us, Ceylana corrected. Me. They believe I'm the key to stopping the Sieni advance. Aren't you? No, I'm only the messenger. The key is what we're seeking. She nodded toward the east, where the terrain dipped into a shallow valley. The basin is just beyond that rise. We should... Her words were cut off by the sound of weapons fire. Not distant, but alarmingly close. They pressed themselves against the rock face, trying to pinpoint the source. There, Kai whispered, pointing to a narrow canyon about half a kilometer away. Flashes of energy weapons illuminated the growing darkness. Moving cautiously, they made their way closer. The sounds of battle grew louder. The sharp crack of Federation pulse rifles, the distinctive harmonic whine of Sieni energy weapons. Then abruptly, silence. They reached the edge of the canyon and peered down. Below them, a Federation patrol lay scattered across the rocky ground. 6 soldiers, their bodies contorted in death. Standing over them was a Sieni strike team, their blue skin almost luminescent in the twilight. They didn't even have a chance to surrender, Kai whispered, horror and anger mingling in his voice. They wouldn't have been offered the chance, Ceylana replied grimly. This is what happens when ancient hatreds are awakened. The young of both our species pay the price for grudges they never knew existed. One of the Sieni soldiers looked up suddenly, scanning the canyon rim. Kai and Ceylana ducked down, but not before Kai caught a glimpse of the soldier's face. Young, eyes burning with a righteous fury that chilled him to the core. We have to go, Ceylana whispered. Now. They retreated silently, taking a more circuitous route toward the echo basin. The encounter had shaken Kai more deeply than he wanted to admit. Those soldiers on both sides were fighting a war they barely understood, dying for secrets buried centuries ago. A sound from above made them both freeze. A Sieni dropship was passing directly overhead, its engines throttled back to near silence. It descended about half a kilometer away, landing lights briefly illuminating the landscape. They're looking for me, Ceylana murmured. They believe I was taken prisoner. Weren't you? For centuries? She shook her head. I volunteered. My clan had the strongest connection to the worlds your people had desecrated. It was my right to serve as keeper. Some honor, Kai muttered. Honor is not the same as pleasure, she replied. Sometimes the greatest honor lies in the heaviest burden. They waited until the dropship's lights disappeared before continuing their journey. The terrain grew more treacherous as they neared the echo basin, the ground broken by fissures that vented steam and noxious gases from Varessa's unstable core. Why here? Kai asked as they picked their way through a particularly hazardous stretch. Why was the treaty signed in such a remote location? It wasn't remote then, Ceylana answered. This was once the heart of a great Sieni city, Kelthara, the Singing City. The basin was its central forum, designed to amplify sound so that a single voice could reach thousands. What happened to it? Your orbital bombardment, she said simply. The same weapons that scarred the planet's surface destabilized its core. The city fell into the resulting fissures. Only the basin remains, protected by its natural formation. They crested a ridge and suddenly the echo basin lay before them. A perfect semicircle carved into the rock face, its surface polished to a mirror shine, despite the centuries of exposure. At its center stood a rusted transmitter, its design a hybrid of Sieni and Federation technology. Ceylana approached it, her bare feet making no sound on the smooth stone. Her hands hovered over the transmitter's controls, trembling slightly. They will kill you for what you've done, she said without turning. Kai remained at the edge of the basin, sensing that this moment required distance. I didn't know. That doesn't matter. Her hands dropped to her sides. Intent means nothing against result. Your kiss broke the seal, whether you understood its significance or not. She turned to face him, her expression softer than he had yet seen it. I was not a prisoner. I was the barrier. Living, breathing, made to hold the war back. Your kiss was the signal. It meant we're ready to fight again. Then we tell them it was a mistake, Kai insisted, stepping forward. We explain. Words won't stop them now, Ceylana interrupted. Only a new signal, a new silence. A tremor ran through the ground beneath them, stronger than the previous ones. In the distance, the horizon lit up with the unmistakable glow of energy weapons. The conflict was intensifying. We're out of time, Ceylana said. She gestured to a dark opening at the base of the polished rock face. The vault lies beneath. It's where the original sarcophagus was created. Kai hesitated, looking back the way they had come. He could still return to the outpost, rejoin his unit, fight alongside his people. It would be easier than what Ceylana was suggesting, and it would be futile. He turned back to her and nodded. Show me. The passage into the vault descended steeply, the walls lined with the same luminescent etchings Kai had seen in the ruined Sieni building. They provided just enough light to navigate by, casting eerie blue-green shadows that seemed to move independently of their sources. The etchings are alive in a sense, Ceylana explained, noticing his unease. They respond to the presence of sentient beings, drawing energy from our bioelectric fields. They're feeding on us? A symbiotic relationship. They take a small amount of energy. In return, they provide light and record our passage. The walls of this tunnel hold the memories of everyone who has walked this path. The idea of being recorded by alien technology made Kai's skin crawl, but he pushed the feeling aside. There were more immediate concerns. The tunnel eventually opened into a vast chamber that defied the apparent dimensions of the basin above. Its ceiling soared hundreds of meters overhead, supported by columns that seemed too delicate for their burden. At the center of the chamber stood a single object, a sarcophagus-shaped container, its surface covered in intricate patterns that shifted and flowed like liquid. "It was never just stone," Ceylana said, approaching the sarcophagus with reverence. "It's a containment system, a living technology that converts biological material into a static form while preserving consciousness." As they moved deeper into the chamber, Kai noticed something in the shadows, another sarcophagus-like structure. But this one was cracked and broken, its surface dull and lifeless. Dark stains marked the stone around it. "What's that?" he asked, moving toward it. Ceylana's hand on his arm stopped him. "We've tried before," she said, her voice hollow. "There was another." He didn't endure. His scream was heard in space. Kai felt a chill run through him. "Another human?" "No, one of my own people." She approached the broken sarcophagus, running her fingers along its fractured edge. "After the first treaty began to fray, when your people started exploring the forbidden worlds, we attempted to create a second seal, a reinforcement. What happened? The mind must be willing, truly willing." Her luminescent eyes darkened with the memory. "Tevrin was a warrior, chosen for his strength. He believed he was prepared for the sacrifice, but in the final moment, his resolve faltered. Fear took hold. And the system rejected him, violently." Ceylana gestured to the stains. The conversion process had already begun. When his mind fought against it, the containment failed. His body shattered. The psychic backlash was felt by every Scian within 50 light years. Kai stared at the broken sarcophagus, suddenly understanding the true weight of what he was considering. "You're asking me to do something that one of your own people, a warrior, couldn't handle. I'm asking you to do something that requires more than a warrior's strength," Ceylana corrected gently. "It requires acceptance, complete and without reservation. And if I fail like he did," her silence was answer enough. "And it requires a living mind," Kai finally said, understanding at last. "Your mind. Until now. If I return to the seal, they won't trust it," she said, confirming his suspicion. "I've been broken. The system would detect the flaw, and my people would know." She turned to him, her luminescent eyes solemn. "It has to be someone new, someone untainted by previous failure." The implication hung between them, as it had in the ruins. But this time Kai didn't back away. "Me," he said quietly. "Yes. Why would they accept me? I'm human. The enemy. The system doesn't care about species. Only intent." Ceylana placed her hand on the sarcophagus, and the patterns beneath her touch glowed brighter. "It will read your mind, your heart. If your desire for peace is genuine, it will accept you. And if it's not, then it will reject you, painfully." Kai stared at the sarcophagus, trying to process what was being asked of him. To give up his life not through death, but through a kind of suspended animation that could last centuries. To become a living statue, a silent guardian against a war that his own people might not even recognize they were preventing. "How long?" he asked. "How long would I be like that?" "Until both sides truly desire peace," Ceylana replied. "Until the treaty is honored not through force or fear, but through understanding. So, potentially forever." Potentially. A distant boom shook the chamber, dust and small fragments of stone raining down from the ceiling. The conflict above was growing closer. "There's no time left for deliberation," Ceylana said. "The Sieni are landing on Varese now. Your Federation forces are engaging them. Soon the fighting will spread to other worlds." Kai closed his eyes, weighing his options. Return to the surface and fight a war that couldn't be won. Or stay here and disappear. Become a footnote in history, if that. Most likely he would be listed as missing in action, presumed dead. His family would mourn him without ever knowing his fate. But they would live. Everyone would live. He opened his eyes and stepped forward. "What do I need to do?" Ceylana's expression showed a mixture of relief and sorrow. "Remove your outer garments. The system needs direct contact with your skin." Kai shed his uniform jacket and shirt, then hesitated at his boots. Everything, Ceylana clarified. The conversion process needs to be complete. Swallowing his embarrassment, Kai stripped down completely. The air in the chamber was cool against his bare skin, raising goosebumps. Ceylana approached him, placing her hand on his chest directly over his heart. Her touch was warmer than he expected, almost hot. Once sealed, you will not age, she said softly. You will not move. You will not die. You will exist in a state between consciousness and sleep, aware but detached. Time will lose meaning. But they'll live, right? Kai asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Both sides? The war will stop? She nodded. If your intent is true, the signal will be sent. My people will recognize it for what it is, an offer of genuine peace. Then let's do it. Ceylana guided him to the sarcophagus. The patterns on its surface parted at his approach, revealing a hollow interior shaped roughly to human proportions. Step inside, she instructed. Once the process begins, do not resist. Acceptance is key to a successful conversion. Kai took a deep breath and climbed into the sarcophagus. The interior was neither warm nor cold, but seemed to adapt to his body temperature. He lay back, trying to find a comfortable position despite the awkward fit. Is this how it was for you? He asked, suddenly needing to know. Ceylana's expression softened. No, for me it was a ceremony. Hundreds of my people watching, singing the songs of passage. Sunlight streaming through crystal domes. She glanced around the dim chamber. I'm sorry it can't be the same for you. It's okay, Kai said, surprising himself with how much he meant it. This feels right somehow. She nodded, understanding. Then she leaned down and placed a kiss on his forehead, in the exact spot where he had kissed her statue form. For symmetry, she explained, straightening, and gratitude. She stepped back and began to sing, a haunting melody that resonated with the chamber's natural acoustics. The patterns on the sarcophagus responded, flowing up over the edges and beginning to cover Kai's body. As the material began to envelop him, Ceylana's song faltered for a moment. Her eyes took on a distant look, as if seeing beyond the chamber walls. When I was in stone, she whispered, her voice carrying clearly despite its softness, I felt every touch, every kiss, every child who placed their small hands on what they thought was merely a statue. The living material continued its slow progress up Kai's body, but he remained still, listening. Time moves differently there, she continued. Decades pass like breaths. I felt seasons change through the warmth and cold of the stone. I heard laughter, arguments, celebrations. I witnessed your people's lives played out before a monument they never truly understood. Her voice grew tighter, filled with an ancient pain. I sensed when your ships began venturing to the forbidden worlds. I felt the vibrations when ancient sites were excavated, when sacred grounds were terraformed. I couldn't scream. I couldn't warn the children who touched me that someday ships would come, that their games around my feet would give way to war. She resumed her song, but now Kai could hear the undercurrent of sorrow in the alien melody. Centuries of silent witness, of helpless observation. My father negotiated the original treaty, she said during a pause in the song. He believed in peace when others called for vengeance. When the Federation suggested a living seal, he volunteered himself. Her eyes met Kai's, but the council chose me instead, his daughter. They said my youth would ensure a longer-lasting peace. The material had reached Kai's chest now. He found he could still speak, though his voice sounded distant to his own ears. What happened to him? He died protesting the decision, trying to take my place. A single tear traced a luminescent path down her blue cheek. His last words to me were, "A peace built on sacrifice is no peace at all." I've had centuries to consider whether he was right. As the material crept higher, Ceylana suddenly stiffened. Her eyes widened, taking on that same intense luminescence they had shown in the echo basin. Voices, not physical but psychic, flooded her consciousness. The Sieni High Council had become aware of what was happening. It is a human, one voice said, the thought words dripping with disdain. This is weakness, not strength. He will break as Tevrin did, another added. His mind is not prepared for eternity. Then the war continues, a third voice pronounced. Perhaps it is time to end the Federation entirely. Ceylana closed her eyes, focusing her own thoughts to respond. He chooses freely what Tevrin could not accept. That is not weakness. He is human, the first voice repeated, as if this alone was damning. Yes, came a new voice, older and deeper than the others. That is precisely his strength. He did not know what his actions would unleash, yet he chooses to bear the consequences. When have we shown such courage? Silence followed, a hesitation that spanned light years. We will observe, the elder voice finally continued. If he endures, we will honor the new seal. The voices faded, leaving Ceylana drained but resolute. She looked down at Kai, now nearly engulfed by the living material. In his eyes she saw fear, but also determination, a willingness to step into darkness for the sake of light. It felt like being submerged in warm honey, a gentle pressure that increased gradually as the living technology engulfed him. Kai's instinct was to struggle, to fight against the encroaching substance, but he remembered Ceylana's warning and forced himself to relax. The material crept up his legs, his torso, his chest. When it reached his neck, panic flared despite his resolve. His breathing quickened. Don't fight it, Ceylana's voice came through the growing cocoon. Let it happen. Trust. Kai closed his eyes and focused on his reason for doing this. Not glory, not honor, just the simple desire to prevent needless death, to give both humans and Cian a chance at true peace. The material flowed over his face, covering his mouth, his nose, his closed eyes. For one terrifying moment, he couldn't breathe. Then the sensation of needing to breathe simply faded. His heartbeat slowed, his muscles relaxed completely. The last thing he heard was Ceylana's voice, singing him into his new existence. Then silence enveloped him. Not the absence of sound, but a deeper quiet that seemed to extend to the very core of his being. Kai Nern became still. 10 years passed on Varus. The scarred landscape began to heal as native vegetation, dormant for centuries, gradually reclaimed the rocky plains. The ruins of the Sci-Fi settlements were carefully excavated rather than destroyed, their secrets studied by joint teams of human and Sci-Fi scholars. The training outpost transformed into a research center, dedicated to understanding the shared history of the two species. At the center of what had once been the outpost's central plaza, a new monument stood, a human male, eyes closed, hand outstretched in a gesture of peace or offering. Unlike the original statue of Ceylana, this one was openly acknowledged as a living being in suspended animation. No one was allowed to touch it. No one was allowed to forget what it represented. A simple plaque at the base of the statue read, "He didn't stop the war with a weapon. He stopped it by standing still." On Earth, in the quiet suburb of New Alexandria, a middle-aged woman sat at her kitchen table, staring at the official notification that had arrived that morning. The holographic Federation insignia rotated slowly above the tablet's surface, casting blue light across her tired face. Kai Nern, she read aloud, her voice steady despite the pain in her eyes. Status update, missing in action. Presumed deceased. Across from her, a younger man paced the length of the kitchen, his movements sharp with anger. The family resemblance was unmistakable. The same dark eyes, the same strong jawline. Thomas Nern, Kai's brother, had taken emergency leave from his own Federation posting when the news arrived. "It's been 10 years, Mother," he said. 10 years of investigating. And this is all they give us? Presumed deceased? No explanation, no body, nothing? "They say there was fighting on Varus," she replied, scanning the document again. "Many were lost, but not Kai." Thomas stopped pacing, his hands clenched at his sides. He was too smart for that, too careful. The report says he went missing before the main conflict even began. Sergeant Voss reported him absent from his post shortly after the induction ceremony. Tomas made a dismissive sound. "So they're calling him a deserter? Kai? He wouldn't run from a fight." "The report doesn't say that. It just says—" "I know what it says." Tomas slammed his fist on the table, making the tablet jump. "It says nothing, just like every report for the past decade. Investigation ongoing. Status unchanged. They're hiding something, Mother. Something about what happened on Varus." She reached across the table, taking her son's hand. "Thomas, we have to accept. I'm going to find out what really happened." He pulled away, moving to the window that overlooked their small garden. "I've requested a transfer to the diplomatic corps. The new Joint Human Cieni Council is looking for military liaisons." "Tomas, no. It's my best chance to get access to Varus," he interrupted, "to find out what they're not telling us about Kai." His mother rose, her face suddenly stern. And what if what you find isn't what you want to hear? What if Kai did desert, or worse? Kai wasn't a coward, Thomas insisted. He didn't just disappear. He did something. Something they don't want us to know about. She sighed, her shoulders sagging with the weight of a decade of uncertainty. Whatever he did, whatever happened, it won't bring him back to us. I don't need him back, Thomas said, his voice softening. I just need the truth. He deserves that much. Outside their window, a Federation news broadcast played on the neighborhood's public screen. The sound was muted, but the images were clear. Human and Cyeni diplomats shaking hands, signing accords, celebrating a peace that had seemed impossible just a decade earlier. Beneath the images, a scrolling headline announced the opening of a new memorial on Varese, dedicated to those lost in what was now being called the final conflict. Neither of them noticed the brief image of a statue that flashed across the screen, a human male with his hand outstretched in eternal offering. Selena visited often, though few recognized her for what she was. To most, she was simply another Cyeni diplomat, one of many who now worked alongside humans to rebuild what centuries of conflict had destroyed. She would stand before the statue for hours, sometimes singing softly in her native tongue. If anyone had been able to translate those songs, they would have heard stories, tales of the worlds beyond the Federation's borders, where the Cyan had rebuilt their civilization, accounts of the ongoing negotiations between the species, descriptions of the changes taking place throughout known space. She told Kai everything, believing that on some level, he could hear her. On a clear autumn day, 10 years after the events that had changed the course of two civilizations, an elderly man in a Federation admiral's uniform made his way slowly across the plaza. Admiral Thorne's hair had gone completely white, his face lined with the weight of a decade spent rebuilding from the brink of war. He walked with a slight limp, a souvenir from a Cyeni energy weapon during the brief fighting on Varese. He approached Kai's statue, standing before it in silence for several minutes. A young officer, a lieutenant, fresh from the academy, waited respectfully a few paces behind. Sir, the lieutenant finally ventured, if I may ask, who was he? Thorne didn't turn around. His name was Kai Nern. Beyond that, nobody of consequence. But he must have been important, the lieutenant persisted, to have a monument like this. Was he a war hero? A diplomat? Neither. Thorne reached out, his gnarled hand hovering just above the statue's outstretched palm, careful not to make contact. He was a new recruit, barely out of training. He disappeared during the first hours of the conflict. The lieutenant frowned, confused. Then why? Because he did what none of us could do, Thorne said, his voice roughened by age and memory. We, the admirals, the diplomats, the politicians, we were all too busy defending our positions, justifying our actions, protecting our secrets. We couldn't see past centuries of mistrust. He finally turned to face the young officer. This monument doesn't commemorate who he was, Lieutenant. It commemorates what he became. A bridge. A sacrifice freely given, with no expectation of glory or recognition. I don't understand, sir. No, I don't suppose you would. Thorne's gaze returned to the statue. You've grown up in peacetime. You never saw what we were on the verge of. Total war with an enemy we barely understood. The Cyan, sir? Yes, though enemy is a word we no longer use. Thorne sighed. Someday the full story may be declassified. Until then, remember this. Sometimes the greatest victories come not from those who speak the loudest, but from those who choose silence so that others may find their voice. The lieutenant saluted crisply, though uncertainty still showed in his eyes. Yes, sir. Go on ahead, Thorne said, waving him away. I'd like a moment alone. When the young officer was out of earshot, Thorne leaned closer to the statue. 10 years, he murmured. The Joint Council is formalizing the last of the treaties next month. Permanent peace, they're calling it. I don't know if you can hear me in there, son, but it worked. Whatever you did, it worked. He straightened, adjusting his uniform. Your brother's been asking questions. Smart kid. Determined. Reminds me of you. He's getting close to the truth. I'm not sure whether to help him or hinder him. A tired smile crossed his face. I suppose that's a problem for another day. As the Admiral walked away, a slender Cyeni figure emerged from the shadows on the far side of the plaza. Selana watched him go, then approached the statue herself. She placed a hand gently against his cheek. the only person allowed such direct contact. A young human child broke away from her mother, running across the plaza toward the statue. The girl's eyes were wide with curiosity, her small hand outstretched. "Ellie," the mother called, hurrying after her. "Stop right there!" The child paused just before the statue, looking up at the frozen face with innocent wonder. "Why can't I touch it?" she asked as her mother caught up and gently pulled her back. "It's not just a monument, sweetheart," the mother explained, her voice softening. "It's special. We don't touch it out of respect." The child tilted her head, studying the statue's face intently. "But Mommy, look, he's smiling." The mother glanced up, ready to correct her daughter, but the words died on her lips. For just a moment, in the golden light of the setting sun, she could have sworn she saw the statue's expression shift. A subtle curve of the lips, a softening around the eyes. "Yes," she whispered, a chill running down her spine. "I suppose he is." She led her daughter away, casting one last wondering look over her shoulder. Selana remained, a silent guardian beside the silent guardian, both of them watching over a piece that had been purchased with the currency of sacrifice. And sometimes, in the right light, observers might have noticed the statue's expression shift ever so slightly. A ghost of a smile playing across stone lips as another day of peace drew to a close.